Today we have a really full program of interesting presentations under the theme of practical approaches to data management. And I will now hand over to Krystyna, who will be the chair of the first session. Krystyna.
Good morning and welcome to the session Introduction and Practical Approaches to Data Management. My name is Krystyna. I'm from the Swiss Federal Archives. Our first speaker is Mrs. Manuela Speiser, a very special guest from the European Commission. Manuela is the Directorate General for Communication Networks, Content and Technology. Today, Manuela is our key speaker, and she will sharing with us her opinions on eArchives as building blocks of the digital single market. With that, I ask you to give your full attention to Manuela, and please welcome Manuela on the stage.
Thank you for the nice introduction, and good morning to everybody. Thank you also for the invitation. It's a great pleasure for me to be here with you. So, connecting Europe, that of course can mean many things. And to have a light start in today's three, I would suggest that we start with some tourism and connecting cities. Let's do it like that. So. When I've seen this postcard view from Brighton, it reminded me of Bregenz, the city where I was born. Bregenz is, if you go straight to the southeast, it's about 900 kilometers from Brighton. And here you see the similarity of the postcards. And what has triggered the association are, of course, those pile structures in the water. There are many of those in Bregenz. This, for example, is a hotel. And this is a museum, an open-air museum. It is the reconstruction of a prehistoric village, because at this place in the lake, there is a very rich archaeological site from the Stone Age. So these are the original wooden pillars which are in the ground. And I mean, it's not as old as the Jurassic Sea that we've seen yesterday, but the museum claims to have the oldest textiles in Europe made 5,000 years ago. Now, that's just for the curiosity. The fact that we do things like that, reconstructing of sunken villages and building hotels which refer to this very, very old style of building, is actually something that we see in many places. It's quite common. And it does reflect, I believe, the genuinely human need to make those connections to the past. Our cultures and our understanding of ourselves, both as individuals and as a society, are grounded in where we come from. And that's why we create archives and why we make so much effort in curating and preserving them. If we continue, or if you make this travel from Brighton to Bregenz, you might stop in another village, starting with BR. There you will need an umbrella, by the way. You won't find me there because our offices are in Luxembourg. Bring also an umbrella to Luxembourg. You will find there the historic archives of the European Commission. This is their website. And you see, maybe you can see the slogan which they put on their homepage, remembering the past to build a better future. So again, we have those connections. The illustration that they use is not a document, it's a microfiche sheet or microfiche, I don't know how you call that, but you recognize it, you know what it is, which tells you that this is not the real thing there. The real historical documents with the signatures and seals on it are in Florence. at the university institute where you can study European integration. So this is an example of a physical archive, or an analog archive, that is in two places. And now, of course, in the digital world, things are even completely different. In Bregenz, there is also an archive. It's called Landesarchiv, and Landesarchiv, sorry. And this is a picture of it from the 1980s. Bregenz has this Landesarchiv because it's the capital city of a region. So we have 9 regions in Austria, like in England and like in Belgium, so more connections. And this is a picture showing the archive. And this is the same picture in the archive, because this archive is online. And as you see immediately, this is a much richer, or allows a much richer experience with this photograph. You can see it in its context, you can see similar pictures, you can see the metadata, the licensing conditions, so this one is Creative Commons 4.0 or something like that. You can, of course, see the name of the photographer and etc. And you can also take it, even if you're not in Bregenz but in Luxembourg, put it in a PowerPoint presentation and show it in Brighton. So that's a nice thing about eArchives. And I don't tell you anything new here. So they allow a richer experience with the archival content. But as you all know, and as we also heard yesterday in some of your presentations, it's a much more complex task to be an archivist or document manager in the electronic or in the digital world. You have to cope with ever more digital documents in ever more different formats. I won't go into detail here, you know that all. And there was even a similar slide from the Dutch National Archive yesterday afternoon. You have to take care of digital preservation and, of course, the search engines. So it is a complex task. And also, the digital world allows the archives to connect between each other and also the users. And therefore, there is also a need for technology standards, for exchange of information and know-how, and for a harmonized legal framework that allows and supports this cross-sector and cross-border access. And these are the things that we in the EU jargon call EU added value. And therefore, the eArchives are an area where we intervene. And I will show you a little bit what has been done in this area. Now, generally, as the European Union can intervene in 3 ways. Policy coordination, that means bringing stakeholders together, stimulates a debate. Then legislation and funding, financial support. And the size of the circles on the slide reflect also the proportion of those interventions. So the funding is not the most important one. I will now take a few minutes to recapitulate what has been done in this area. And I ask you to bear with me that this will be very short, because I don't want to spoil your weekend. But if you have, if you would like to have more information, please do not hesitate to contact me, and I'm happy to send you an email. So let's go very, very quickly through that. In the area of policy coordination, to start with, there are in the last 10 years, more or less 10 years, 3 recommendations issued either by the Commission, by the European Council, or by the European Parliament, or by a mixture. And I suppose you all heard of them. It's a recommendation on increasing the cooperation in the field of archives in Europe. The recommendation on film heritage, on the protection of film heritage, and a recommendation on digitization and digital preservation. Usually, those recommendations are a framework for collaborations between the member states. So there are expert groups from the member states who regularly meet and report to each other and to the Commission, and so forward the field, let's say. 3 of those expert groups are here on the slide. You know them all: the European Archives Group, the Public Sector Information Group, and the Digital Cultural Heritage and Europeana Expert Group. That has just a new name, but it has already existed before. And also, the DLM Forum was created in such a context 20 years ago. It was set up as an expert group, as far as I know. In the area of legislation, I would like to cite the Public Sector Information Directive. So that is a European law applicable in all member states, stipulating that information created by public bodies should also be accessible to the public and reusable, including also for economic purposes, for businesses who want, for example, to create apps using geographic data. And then there is the data protection regulation about the right of every citizen to know if personal data about them is being processed somehow, and also the right to access information about processed personal data. So behind that, of course, is again an obligation for archiving this information in case that someone asks for it. Now for the funding, there are 3 branches, 3 programs, which I would like to mention. It's a framework program for research, FP7, which is finished by now, and where we funded research in the areas of digital preservation and digital infrastructures, digital libraries, and things like that. Another program was a competitiveness and innovation program. And again, another one, a new one, is the Connecting Europe facility. And now I would like to show you some examples of these programs or projects. The digital preservation research the digital preservation program has funded 23 projects starting in 2007 and has contributed a little bit more than 100 million euro to this research. And it has brought together some 250 organizations representing all stakeholders, above all, of course, the memory institutions, but also researchers and IT specialists. And we will meet one just afterwards. No? Yeah, so. Now, I cannot show you all the 23 projects, but since many people in this room were somehow involved in this research and have contributed with their enthusiasm and hard work, I want to briefly summarize the results, also to show you respect. So what we have got out of this research were formal models to characterize digital objects, methods and tools for preservation planning, better tools for automation and scalability, tools for web archiving, an emulation framework for obsolete media, in that case, computer games, techniques and tools for recovering loss and for repairing damaged digital objects. And towards the end of the program, there are also projects embedding reasoning and intelligence in the information life cycle, such as semantics that evolve over time or use contexts, and not least with the purpose to identify obsolete information, such as insignificant emails, as we have seen yesterday. Another very important result from this research are services for end users. And here the most important ones are the Open Preservation Foundation, a community around open source tools, which I suppose also is very well known in this community. And Presto Center, a competence center for the preservation of digital audiovisual records. In the infrastructures program, we funded several projects, one of which is or was Sendari, or Sendari, I don't know how they pronounce this. And the acronym stands for Collaborative European Digital Archival Research Infrastructure. I'm almost sure some Sendari people are also in this room, so thank you also to them. Then if we look at this innovation program, which I had as a second place in the slide before, I would like to cite two programs. One was aggregating content in Europeana, which has led to the project APEX, Network of Excellence around the Archives Portal Europe. And another SIP program was called e-archiving services. And there we were looking for technical specifications and tools for the integration of document management systems and archival systems, and also for sharing information on how this integration works, basically, or could work, or should work. And the result of this program was the E-ARK project. Now, this is just a cliffhanger. I will not talk about E-ARK now because the day is dedicated to it anyway. So you see there were many efforts made and many programs either specifically targeting archives or involving archives. And as we set out making connections between the present and the past, I will continue in the same mode and also make a connection to the present or future here as a last part. You all know that in the current Commission, is one of the priorities is the digital single market. This is about using the opportunities that the digital world can offer for the economy if we managed to tear down the borders between the countries, not only by traveling, but also in the internet. So it aims to open digital opportunities, and it's built on 3 pillars. We love pillars in the European Commission. They are everywhere, even in the treaties, as you might know. Access to information, access to documents for the citizens and businesses. Then creating a legal environment that allows for this access and makes it easier, and also allows for reuse, of course. And the maximum benefits for the economy, not neglecting the societal impacts. So that's, in 3 words, the digital single market. And a financial instrument of the digital single market is called the Connecting Europe Facility, short CEF. And that is an infrastructure program that runs from 2014 to 2020 and supports trans-European networks in the areas of transport, energy, and telecommunications. This is also called CEF Digital. And that is another cliffhanger, because there will be a presentation on this in the afternoon. Not in the afternoon, after the coffee break. So the Ceph Digital, you see more pillars on the slides, and more piles connecting the water and the ground and the sky. And here they are meant to be digital bridges across borders to the benefits of citizens, businesses, and public administrations. And this program also promotes the vision of public services not being digital by default, but also cross-border by default. Which brings me now to the role of e-archives in the digital single market. I think for you it's quite obvious that you have an important role here. And it was mentioned yesterday how important sustainable and dependable and accessible archives are in our societies as a basis of the democracy and transparency in the governments. They can also create new business opportunities because they help people, be it they help businesses also, to use and reuse the digital holdings in these archives. And they contribute also to more trust, which is a prerequisite for investing in digital services. And of course, they will allow to provide better services for all citizens, be it as entrepreneurs or as consumers. And yes, I think that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Manuela. Does anyone have any questions? As warming up, I would like to ask you, are there still research projects ongoing and digital preservation?
Yes, thank you. This allows me to mention, have I still got the microphone? Yeah, okay. It allows me to mention one project that is still running and will run until next year. It's called Preforma, and I believe it's interesting in this context because it is led by the Swedish National Archive, so it is also an archives project, and it uses public procurement to do research. So there is a collaboration between the memory institutions and private businesses. And what they do, they will develop tools for checking files at the ingest state, so when they come into the archive, and they will check if they comply with standards. For example, if a PDF file is really a PDF file and has not any errors. And they look at 3 areas, PDF, TIFF, no, not TIFF, that's wrong. A video format and what else? And TIFF, yes, thank you. Yeah.
Other questions? Then perhaps the last one also.
Yes, please.
Okay.
Concerning this connecting Euro facilities, I guess you are talking also about the digital content crossing borders. And I'm interested in this question concerning geolocalization, in which many contents are blocked in some countries within the same European Union.
Yeah.
I know it's there are discussions right now in the parliament.
Yeah.
Do you have any news?
No, I cannot tell you more than you know already, because that's not our area of work, but I can confirm that it is part of this digital single market strategy to reduce geo-blocking wherever this is possible. I mean, as consumers, of course, we are all very upset about this, especially if we are abroad and we cannot access our own, for example, Netflix or whatever. But there are also reasons for keeping this up, and therefore there has to be a compromise. It has to be found, and it's a very long and complicated discussion. One thing has already been achieved. It is now illegal to block access to services that you pay, that you consume legally at your home place while you travel. So that's something that is ongoing.
When we're looking at Pat Manson's contribution to digital preservation earlier in the year, one thing really stood out, and that was that there was very little funding to the National Archives compared with, dare we say, national libraries. Why do you think that is, and perhaps what can we do about it?
Now, when we wrote our calls, so calling for proposals for research, we did not specify who the project participants should be. So in our programs, it was always memory institutions, which obviously does include the archives specifically. Now, so the reply to your question is we had less archives in the programs because they did not apply so much, which maybe is because they are less, or they were, I think that has changed as well, they were less used to this international cooperation and research, and maybe a little bit more reluctant to new things as well. Have you got an idea why it might be, Tim?
Yes, so I can't speak for other archives, but certainly National Records of Scotland finds it very difficult to apply for research funding because there are gates you have to pass in order to be eligible for research funding. And certainly in the UK, we cannot apply because we're not an independent research organisation.
Okay.
And because of that, there is no point in us even putting our hat into the ring for funding in certain contexts. Now, I don't know whether that barrier is an element of any barriers that might be in place in the European context, but it certainly prevents us going for research funding in the UK.
Okay. Now, in the European programs, every legal entity can participate.
Okay.
So,
But
yeah.
there may be a reluctance on the part of archives who are not, because of that lack of research status within their own country, perhaps there may be a reluctance to consider research funding in the first place. They may not consider it as a possible route. It just may pass them by. That's my only thought on it.
Yeah. So, Janet, I'm sorry, we are only speculating, but it was not a deliberate decision from the Commission, that's for sure.
So thank you, Manuela. Thank you.
Thank you.